Welcome to the Beef Lab. I'm your host, Coach Joe Strong, here at the Mecca of Strength and Conditioning, Varsity House Gym. The Beef Lab is an inside look at everything it takes to run a world-class training facility. This is the source for strength entrepreneurs who want to learn more about programming, training athletes, business development, and marketing their brand. We're going to show you how we took Varsity House from a dingy little garage gym to a world-class brand. Hey everyone, Coach Joe Strong here from Varsity House Gym for our next episode of the Beef Lab. In this episode, I'm going to talk about A.S. Prilepins' chart, his famous chart of percentages that athletes all over the world use and it's gotten tons of fame and notoriety, for the last 15 years. So I'm going to break it down. Who is A.S. Prilepin? What does the chart mean? How is it designed? Who is it intended for? How do we use it here, and how do we apply it to athletes? Do we use it with our young kids? Do we use it with everyone? And what are some of the principles that you can take out of it? Okay? Whether or not you use it exactly as it was intended, or making some modifications on your own based on your own program. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, A.S. Prilepin was a world-class Olympic weight coach who trained in the Soviet Union, training Olympic athletes, and is widely considered one of the best Olympic coaches in the world that's ever lived. He was also a remarkable sports scientist and studied the training journals of thousands and thousands of Olympic athletes, and over time and years put together his famous chart of percentages. What the chart represents is a combination of commonalities, okay, that at different weights and percentages, okay, certain positive training results would occur. That if I was in the 70% to 80% range, that if I used a certain reps and sets, there was an optimal number of lifts and an optimal range to which they fell in. If you were below the range, no training effect. If you were above the range, no training effect, or a negative training effect could occur, either overtraining or undertraining. So by putting together his chart and studying thousands of athletes and having a unique system where the Soviet Union literally had all these athletes in one area to train from and to study, he was able to come up with his famous chart of percentages. Okay. So basically it's broken down like this, that the whole idea is that based upon your training max and the maxes and your competition lifts, as he was working with Olympic athletes, okay, that if you can't train at 100% max every single session, that you have to use some percentage maxes to work on technical aspects and technical work and such. What he found was that even at lighter percentages, you can elicit a positive training effect by working in the optimal range, sets, and reps. Okay? So for an example, if you're working in the lighter percentage ranges for speed and explosive power, okay, 3 sets, 3 reps, 6 sets with an optimal of 24, that's 18 is the low end of the range, 30 at the high end of the range for, say, more well-trained athletes, okay, or someone looking for just more volume in specific areas, okay, but the optimal is 24. So we usually say here at the gym that we just call that a, 5x5 type day, right, where it's, somewhere around 65% for 5 sets of 5 reps with lots of speed. You could also do, we like, 10 by 3 at the high end, okay? That's something if I'm going real light on the weight, 50%, 55%, and I'm using it for explosive power development, Olympic lifts, speed benching, things like that. I'll work that 10x3 a lot. Something we do a lot here. A West Side Barbell, their speed bench day is generally a 10x3, right? So they do 3 explosive reps on the bench press for all-out speed with either bands or chains, changing hand positions from inside grip, normal grip, wide grip for a few sets each. Okay, and such that if you were in the 70, now the next stage here is 70 to 80%. Okay, that's more general strength, okay, repetitious strength, okay, general strength and conditioning. This is the range we're in most of the time for our youth athletes, high school athletes, okay, and that's going to be reps of 3 reps, 6 sets, 18 is the optimal there, and we're going to be somewhere, again, this range could be, okay, anywhere from 5x3 to 5x5, depending on the weights, sets, and reps. It really is independent of the individual athletes and their abilities. And you got to remember that this chart was produced for Olympic athletes, the highest caliber and highest trained athletes, Olympic weightlifters. That's what they do, is lift weights. So you have to scale this, okay, appropriately for sport athletes. And we like to stay in the optimal range. The high end of the range can sometimes be too much. And for young kids, okay, it's just a general guideline, okay, to go by. At 80% to 90%, you see that the rep range start to drop, okay, because it's hard to achieve sets of 6 with 90% of your max. So again, the rep range drops 2 to 4. So that's going to be, again, 15 is the optimal, okay, 10 is low, 5x2, okay, 5x3, okay, 4x5, okay. So there's some different rep and set schemes that you could use to achieve those numbers and stay within the optimal and or the training range for that percentages. This is where most of the good stuff happens, right? The training effects for maximal strength and technical explosive power, especially for an Olympic weightlifter, anytime you're going to get on the platform as either a weightlifter or a power lifter, you're going to be, you're not even going to touch a weight. Your openers are going to be, close to 85-90% of your max. You're not going to open with a 50% weight. So you get 3 attempts, it's going to be, it's going to be at the higher percentages. So, the highest caliber athletes are going to spend most of their time in this range, okay? Youth athletes here, speed and explosive work here, okay? So now our last phase here, 90% and up, right? 90 plus. Again, the rep and set range drops, and the optimal is only 4 reps here. So if I'm at 90, we'll say 90 to 95%, I'm probably doing a 4x1, right? And I might hit 4 singles at 90%. A well-trained athlete may be able to hit, okay, 4 singles at, okay, 95%, but that's going to be starting to get close to their physiological limit, okay? So again, this was designed for Olympic athletes and higher trained athletes. A lot of powerlifters use this system. West Side Barbell's big on using this system and is all over Prilepins' chart. Olympic weightlifters all over the world use this as a guideline, right? But again, it has a lot to do with what you expose yourselves to. Some athletes, their bodies physiologically respond better to the higher volumes, and some athletes do not. Some athletes like lower volumes at higher weights with more maximal energy type of production, maximum force production. So it really depends on what you see through your training logs and what you see through your athlete's development over a period of time, what they respond to. My recommendation is that you start lighter than you even think you need to, right? Always start too light, right? In the words of Jim Wendler, start too light and work your way through the percentages and see how your athletes respond. okay, and see what the physiological responses, and see what the training logs tell you, right? So if you're working up here in the 80s to 90s and you see the kids I shouldn't say kids, if you see the athletes are pretty beat up, right, and they're super sore and they're not making it through practice and things like that, well, then you know that you're not getting a good positive training effect there, and you back down a little bit and go from there. You have to account for the fact that sport athletes have practice running and have to play a sport, whereas Olympic weightlifters and powerlifters, the sport is moving the weight itself, okay? So that's some things to keep in mind. All right, so how do we apply these numbers for athletes? How do we apply these numbers? Most of our kids here are just that. They are junior high, high school, and college athletes. So anywhere from the ages of, say, 11 to 21, 22 years old. And they are by no means considered to be elite level lifters. Okay, so you have to take some of this with a grain of salt. And what we like to do is kind of modify it a little bit, and I'll show you how we do that. As a general rule of thumb, we're going to take this as 50%, and that's going to be speed work, right? So in the specific lifts, let's say bench, squat, and deadlift, okay, if my max is 400 pounds, then I'm doing speed work with 200 pounds for as much explosive force as I can generate. I'm trying to move the weight as fast and explosive as possible. I want to stay within my rep range, okay? Depending on whether it's a squat, deadlift, or bench press determines whether and how many reps I might use. The upper body can usually take a few more reps. So if I'm going to do upper, in this case, I might do 10 by 3, and I'm going to hit the top end of my spectrum. If it's a lower, okay, it might be 10 by 2, okay, and I'm doing sets of 2 explosive movements at a lighter weight. The next range up, right, now this kind of holds true. Nothing really over 50% is going to be true speed work. And remember, for an athlete, a lot of it has to do with running, jumping, and sprinting, okay? But you want to teach athletes to move loads with a lot of force, and the bench, squat, and deadlift are great for that, as well as the Olympic lifts, okay? And we'll keep the Olympic lifts. If a kid has maxed out in a power clean, you know, at 200 pounds, then 100 pounds is a good weight for working, you know, light technical explosiveness, especially since most of our sport athletes are very basic and very novice in the realm of Olympic weightlifting. Okay? The next range, we just kind of like to go 75, you know, 85, 95, and give it a base like that, right? So depending on the athletes, now these are relative maxes, okay? I'm gonna work a 5x5, a 5x3, and a 5x1, okay? And I'm staying within the realm of my percentages for these. Now, what you have to remember here is that, hey, this is general strength, right? This is strength. We call this strength max, right? We're getting close to the limits of maximal strength. This is going to be taxing. I would say here and here are where we spend 80% of the time with our youth athletes, okay? This might be the beginning of their training and technical training. We have to develop some maximal strength and power development, okay, before they even go back and really work speed work. So speed work for young kids is jumping, running, sprinting, and throwing med balls, where maybe only when they get to be 16, 17, 18 do they start to do true barbell speed work, okay? But this is where we spend most of the time. And then here, we'll call this a training max. And I'll explain that in a second. Okay? And it's a relative max. Okay? These are it's 95%. And what that means to us here training young athletes is that we're reserving a small percentage of their ability for safety concerns and technical flaws. Okay, that any young athlete who's only has a year or two of training under the belt is going to encounter. Okay, again, remembering that this was designed by a world-class Olympic weight coach who coached world-class Olympic athletes. Okay, so in the realm of private sector business, for the percentage of athletes that we have that are high-level Division I pro athletes, right, they are still not in any way, shape, or form elite level lifters. Nothing compared to someone who is an Olympic weightlifter or a professional power lifter who lifts and lifts and lifts every day. Okay, so what we do here is we work this training max, and basically the training max is whatever we can hit in the gym for a good single with good technique. So let's say we have our prerequisite indicators in the gym: bench, squat, deadlift. Okay, and I have an athlete who we work up to some relative singles, and as soon as I start to see the strain, the slowing down of the bar, and the technical aspect of the lift begin to degrade, that is, in a sense, their max. So let's just say, for the sake of this argument, that's a 200-pound bench, a 300-pound squat, and a 300-pound deadlift for some high school athlete. My training max is going to be 90% of that. Okay, 180, okay, 180, 270, okay, 270. That's my training max. That's what I'm going to base everything off of. Okay, and then what I'm going to do from there is periodically, every 6, 8, 10 weeks, depending on time of the year, season. Obviously, off season only. I'm not true maxing kids in season or the first week of school and first week of off season training, right? We're gonna work that into our program. I'm gonna retest that training max. I'm gonna work it up to a little bit higher level. If I know at 85% of my training max, right, I'm hitting those weights easily, I'll bump them up 10 pounds. If the technical aspect of the lift doesn't degrade and the speed of the bar looks good, I will continue to progress that way, week by week. If the program we're running is a traditional kind of 5-3-1, 5x5, 5x3, 5x1, and I hit numbers, and I hit my first single at 90%, my original max, right? And they crush it. Right, super easy. We've had a couple more weeks of training. We've had another 10 weeks of training in, and they hit that 270 really easy. Okay, well, maybe my second one is 275, 280, right? And I work my way up to a relative new training max. Let's say that kid gets up to 315, right? That's my new training max. Now I redo all my percentages and kind of go backwards, and I repeat the program. I change the variables. I mix up the lifts again, right? I add some new variety to their accessory work, and we train for another 10 weeks, and then we retest another training max, and we just continue that process. Here at Varsity House, we basically have 5 10-week training blocks throughout the year, and we test kids generally at least once within each one of those training blocks. Okay, working in a couple wave undulations, 3-week waves, and deloads into each 10-week blocks. Okay. Now, another question I get: well, do I do this for all? Do I use this for all my lifts? No, this is only for your main lifts. This is only for the big lifts. Okay? This is only for lifts that are your prime indicators for your sport program, whatever those might be. For us, it's bench, squat, deadlift, and we do an overhead press with some of our for our older athletes, okay, and then we do we use some other tests of more physical aptitude, like a pull-up and max rep push-up and things like that. Okay, again, because I'm not training Olympic weightlifters or power lifters, you have to scale some of your tests and some of your indicators to match those sports and those kids. Okay, all right. So from there, then the question is, like I said, do I use these on my other lifts? No. How would I set up a program then using Prilepins chart and using the maximal lifts, right? So let's say it's a lower day and I'm going to squat some type of squat variation, box squat, front squat, back squat, right, whatever, and I'm going to hit 75% 5x5, okay? Then I'm going to speed pull, right, maybe out of the rack, right, like a rack pull, and I'm going to go 50%, okay, but I'm going to go on the low end because I already hit this. I've already put out a lot of energy, and I'm going to speed pull, right. I'm going to be at 50%, and my optimum's 24, but these are young athletes, so I'm going to say my optimal's, 18 or so, and I'm going to go 6x3 with a lot of speed, right? Work those kids, and then from that point on, right, it's just accessory work, right? To bring up your weak areas. It's, a single leg exercise, right? Like a lunge. It's glute ham raises, right? And maybe, because this is, we're training athletes, maybe it's some grip and neck work, right, for football players or something like that, right? And this stuff is just based off of volume and time in. At first it might just be trying to get kids through a whole workout, so it might just be 3x10 here, 3x10 here. And over a period of years that becomes, 4 or 5 sets of 10, maybe becomes weighted glute hams, it becomes weighted lunges, it becomes a circuit lunge and glute ham, okay? And as the trainability of the athlete goes up, so does, the volume, right, over time. Okay? And we talked about that in the last segment, okay? So Prilepins chart is a great way to give you a baseline understanding, okay, and a baseline of percentages, reps, and set schemes to follow. And if you have athletes that are on the higher end of ability, you can stick to the optimal ranges, and you'll know that you're, in a sense, always, barring nutrition and sleep and things like that with your athletes, that you're always going to be trying to get a positive training effect. It makes no sense, okay, to be training at 70% and doing, 10x10, okay, with that, right? 10 sets, 100 reps, right? That's only going to work for, high level, people that have years of training in, right? That's more for mass volume. You're going to be in the lower ranges. For athletes, you could hurt yourself doing that. The accumulation of soreness and joint stress is way too high, right? And you have to look at the ability to develop explosive force and strength, and that's really what's most important, okay? An athlete can get their volume training from their accessory work, right? Dumbbell pressing and rowing and things like that, and that's where they can develop some of that muscle mass and hypertrophy from their accessory work, okay? Last thing here for Prilepins chart is, what if I want to stack percentages, is another question I get a lot. What if I want to do a program, let's say, where I'm going to deadlift, right, and I'm going to do some clusters at 70, 80, 90%, right, and I'm going to work, my way up in percentages. Do I just add up all the ranges together and keep going? Or how do I work that? There are some complicated formulas for this that have been done, and there is no 100% right answer. I've seen a lot of different, literally mathematical formulas that look like, finite, calculus and such. But a simple way to do it is to stick to the low end of the range or even a little bit below and work your way through. Remember, the accumulation of work is going to start to take effect. And the whole idea of Prilepins' chart was to stay at max output, right? That's really the key. If you're going light, you're going hard and fast. If you're going heavy, you're going heavy. And you're under max tension and you're straining as hard as you can and you're pushing it, right? So the whole idea is to maintain explosiveness, maintain energy, maintain strength, power, output, okay? And to make sure that you're resting enough between sets. So what I like to do here is we'll just kind of stack this. Again, on the low end of the range is 18. I might go a little bit lighter on that, and we'll do, somewhere in the range of, I'll go at 70%, and I'll go 5 by 3 here, right? And work my way through that cluster, working good technique, taking lots of rest, right? And then I'll go to 80, okay? And I might go 5 by 2 there. And again, I'm on that lower end. I'm a little bit below the range, okay? But again, I'm accumulating work. And then at 90%, I might just, again, hit 5 by 1, right? And I've worked my way up a ladder. I've generated a lot of energy at the lower percentages. I, accumulated and acclimated myself to some heavier weights and worked in a percent, and then I, hit some heavy numbers for all out power and remember, you want to, if you're going to compete in any type of lifting or you're going to max out regularly, if you never lift heavy, you're not going to know how to lift heavy technically. So you have to at least work with weights in the percentages of 80% and up to have weighted technical ability, right? Because anybody can put a bar on their back and squat with good technical ability. As soon as I load some weight on the bar, the technical aspect of the lift starts to break down. So if you do not train to be technically sound at heavy weight, you will not be. And that's really critical aspect to the long-term development of the athletes you have, especially when we give them away and they go off to college and they have to lift on their own in a different system with different coaches and maybe a little bit less, personal interaction where they have, 50 to 100 kids working out with 1 or 2 strength coaches and a couple GAs watching everybody. Technique can be, on the poor side. So, that's a great way to just summarize Prilepins' chart and some of the ways that we use it here. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment. Don't forget to don't forget to go to iTunes and give us a review and a 5-star rating. And if you have any questions at all or you'd like to learn more about Varsity House Gym and some of the things we're doing here, you can check us out at varsityhousegym.com. See you next time.